Hey everyone, today we are talking about vitamin C. Vitamin C is kind of an old school vitamin. I probably wouldn't have done too much digging into vitamin C if it wasn't for a paper I'm working on right now where we looked at, it's a huge sample of 30,000 Americans who were followed for around 25 years. And they had blood work done, and we had an opportunity to kind of look at what were their circulating blood levels of various biomarkers, and then how long from their exam till when they passed away. And so we're able to correlate, which blood biomarkers seem to be predictive of time to death. And so I think we looked at around 50 variables, and many of them were significantly associated with accelerated mortality. There was only one that was associated with lifespan extension, or it was protective. So there was only one variable that was considered protective, meaning the more of it that you had, the less likely you were to die at any given age. And that variable was, drumroll, you can probably guess, vitamin C. And so that, in writing that paper, I needed to educate myself a bit on vitamin C and its role. And I came across this paper, which I want to talk about today. So this is a super interesting paper, super well done. Titles right here, authors here. It was published in Public Health Nutrition in 2019. So it's fairly new, a couple years old. And they looked at vitamin C, vitamin E, beta-carotene, and mortality. And it was a huge study. Let's look. I think there were, 320,000 participants. So a huge sample size. And what I was curious about, think to yourself, if you found out that vitamin C was protective against mortality, what would you link that to in your mind? What conclusion would you jump to? And so there's really two possible options. One is that, vitamin C protects you against mortality and we should be taking, a vitamin C supplement every day. Or, vitamin C is correlated to some other thing that is protective of mortality. And my first thought was diet. There's other studies out there already that show that blood carotenoids, which are a measure of fruit and vegetable intake, extend lifespan. So I didn't have blood carotenoids in this sample that I was examining, so I thought maybe vitamin C is kind of like blood carotenoids, and that, if you have a high vitamin C level, that means you're probably eating a healthy diet. And so that's an example of a false correlation. So not to get too off topic here, but, for example, if you were to look at cancer rates in individuals who live next to high wattage power lines, you would find that their cancer rates are actually higher than people who don't. And so you could jump to the false conclusion that living near a power line increases your risk of cancer. And, there's a lot of people who think that, and it's kind of viewed as a little conspiratorial. And the reason being is that, that study doesn't really tell us anything. It doesn't tell us that living next to a power line means you're more likely to get cancer. It means there's something about the person who lives near a power line that's more likely to get cancer. And probably a big something that explains that could be socioeconomic status. If you tend to buy a house under a high wattage power line, it's typically not, Beverly Hills or what have you. So there's and that's just one example. There could be 100 different things that are, correlated with cancer risk that are also correlated with living under a high wattage power line. It doesn't mean that high wattage power lines cause cancer. So, that's kind of my first thought when I see this vitamin C correlation, is maybe it's a proxy marker for diet. So that's why I loved this study, because it kind of shed some light on that idea. So they looked at the relative risk of cardiovascular disease for the highest versus the lowest category of vitamin C intake. If you were in the highest category of vitamin C intake, you had a 21% less chance of dying than someone who is in the lowest vitamin C intake category. So that's really protective. That's a significant protective variable. If something had a hazard ratio of 1, it means it has no effect on mortality. If it was 1.01, that means that each unit increase has a 1% increased mortality risk. In terms of vitamin C intake, each 1 unit increase has a 21% mortality risk reduction. So that was pretty cool. Compared to vitamin E, which is not as protective at 0.91, or beta-carotene, which is also not as protective at 0.89. That's intake. That's dietary intake. So interestingly, the relative risk for vitamin C circulating concentration. So this has nothing to do with intake. This is what is the actual amount of vitamin C in your blood. And so I knew it would be protective from the study I did, but look at this. It is a 0.6. That's huge. So if you're in the highest category of vitamin C levels in your blood, you have a 40% less likely chance of dying at any given age than someone who's in the lowest concentration. So what does this mean? Doesn't mean definitively that vitamin C isn't a proxy for some other marker like overall diet quality. But it does kind of point us in the direction that vitamin C itself is independently protective, that vitamin C concentration in your blood reduces mortality risk. So that goes along with what we found in our investigation. And it also shows that, for example, if you're in a high vitamin C dietary intake, that means your diet overall, you're eating a lot of fruits and vegetables. That's not as protective as just having a high vitamin C level. So what does this suggest? We can't say for certain that a vitamin C supplement every day is going to reduce your heart disease risk, but this certainly suggests that. Obviously, it would take a trial to show that definitively, and I'll have to do some more digging. I may be able to find a paper that shows that. But for now, I think you can be, fairly certain that you're not going to do any harm by stocking your pantry with some vitamin C. And of course, this isn't medical advice, but I'm about to go take one right now. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.